Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first session in August, a month where we celebrate independence and wherein our sessions are largely focused on ideas of freedom, of liberty, and how this has relevance in the life of our nation and its citizens today. We have an eclectic lineup for you this month, ranging from the songs of Rabindranath Tagore, revisioned by Priya Sarrukai Chabria today, that you will be listening to discussions on our so-called minorities. We have Annie Zedi's remarkable prelude to a riot. We have Sarabpreet Singh's story of the Sikhs, and we have Ghazala Wahab, Born a Muslim. We also have an illustrated talk on being Jewish in India by Oris Soltes, who's an academic in the US. In between, we are going to talk about poetry across borders. We're going to talk about feminism and the liberty to write. So I hope you're going to join us every weekend and enjoy these conversations. I promise you're not going to be disappointed. Today, on Rabindranath Tagore's 80th death anniversary, we have Priya Sarrukai here with us to talk about her beautiful new book called Sing of Life. Here it is. I recommend it highly. It is beautiful outside and inside. And the exquisite verses, some of which you're going to listen to today, I'm sure are going to convince you that this is a book worth keeping in your library. And as I said earlier, it's a revisioning of Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali, his meditations on life, on nature, grace, and brokenness, which won him the Nobel Prize in 1913. In Priya's interpretation of this world classic, she seeks to give a new life to his words, and she invites new readers to re-engage with Tagore's prose poetry. In conversation with her is Devapriya Roy, who's also here. She's written 3 novels, The Vague Woman's Handbook, The Weight Loss Club, and Friends from College, all of which sound really interesting with wonderful titles. She's published The Heat and Dust Project in 2015 along with Saurabh Jha, and this is a travel memoir which actually teaches you to travel on a shoestring budget. She's collaborated with artist Priya Kurian to create Indira, the acclaimed graphic biography of Indira Gandhi. So welcome, both of you. Welcome, Priya, whom I'm seeing here after a very, very long time, and welcome, Devapriya, to Majha House. In better times, I hope we will have you there in person. And let's get started right away on what promises to be a most exciting conversation, peppered with many readings, I hope, of Priya's exquisite verses. Over to you, Devapriya.
Thank you, Preeti. Delighted to be here today at the Majha House. In my head, I am in Amritsar. We've had too long a pandemic and too long that we've been distanced this way, right? Priya, I have been so moved by your verses. I have been reading them over the last few weeks now. I have lots of questions. But before we sort of get into the poetry and before we get you to read a little bit, what I want you to ask is, how did this project come to be? It's called Sing of Life, revisioning Tagore's Gitanjali. And I was very intrigued by your choice of word revisioning. So how did you get to this project?
Thank you. I would like to thank Majha House and all my publishers, particularly Kartika, who's been absolutely wonderful with me, and all the people we don't see, because that's very important, especially during the pandemic. They worked through the pandemic getting this book ready, for which I'm very grateful. The couriers, the drivers, the packers, the printers, they were working through. So I have to thank all of them and their designers, the whole team. Before I get into talking about the book, which began suddenly. actually, just on the spur of a moment, we were, my husband and I were in a hill station called Bir in Himachal, and he was reading this. He'd taken this from the bookshelf of the cafe where we were. We were waiting our hot coffee, and there he said, "Let me have a look at the Gitanjali." And I peeked over his shoulder. And by the time we finished our coffee, the book was on my side, and I was saying, "Yes, I'm going to, I have to get into this," because even as I was reading, the certain words seemed to almost fly into my eyes like swans. I could see poems within each of the song poems that Tagore had written. And now let me be very clear here. I'm talking about Tagore's own translation of the Gitanjali. I'm not talking about the Bengali version. I don't speak the language. From his translation that I started working. So first of all, it's a translation which Tagore has done. On top of that, it's a palimpsest. He worked on it. I have further worked on it. I hope there are many more who will work on this. It is also a collage because I don't use all of his words. And here is where it becomes important to stress that for me, I use the word revisioning because it's a tribute. My book is very much a tribute to Tagore's luminous vision, really, And by revisioning, one could think of it as re-looking at, and also revising in a way. And I think that too has happened in a sense, because what I did was I found there were archaic words, thou, thee, which wasn't sitting well with me. Also, I have translated a Bhakti poetry, especially from classical Tamil. And as you know, Andal, the autobiography of a goddess from Zuba. So, when you're working with Bhakti, there is the intimacy of you, the familiarity. And I think I just pulled it from there also, and also because I wanted the immediacy of Tagore's book to come through. It is for me very much a living poem, and it will live on. As we know, if the original is great, it will live on. It's the translations that have to keep being redone for each age. And I think it was Walter Benjamin who said that.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
this is one of the aspects that came to me. So when I was doing this, I trimmed the embroidery, a lot of the alliteration. I wanted to get into the core and intensify the poems, because that is what I found was speaking to me. So with each of his poems, or prose poems, the song offerings of the Gitanjali in the English, I made 2 poems. The first was a fuller, shall we say, version of it.
Right.
And the second is the drifting, almost snatches of song which you hear.
And
why?
Beautiful. It works so beautifully. We'll be able to show the audience this as well shortly, Priya, right? When I share the image. So you'll see what she's done, right? The 2 versions.
Yeah, because doing it once was certainly not enough. I went back to it, and these other poems seem to emerge, and I'm sure there are more that will come in. Also, because I think this is important for Tagore. I mean, he was open to argument, open to debate, open to reason, very much so, which we need in today's world. And therefore, there is, you sense the freedom in the work. You sense the invitation to work with it. And therefore, I just happily went along without thinking of consequences, Tagore, the institution,
I think, Priya, you're saying, you just said a little while ago that, I have no Bengali. And I think, in a way, that sets you free. Because when you grow up in Bengal and the shadow of Tagore is such that then, you worship, but you don't want to engage as you've done. And the other thing that struck me just now as you were speaking is that how intuitively you actually restored in your text the original, because in the original, thou and thee, these distancing words are not used, right? I think Tagore used it in his translation because he thought that, the Western audience he was translating for at the time would not understand, right? Which is why the capital T and the thou, right? But in the original, it flows in, and yours has brought it right back to that.
I'm very glad to hear that. And today, this month, as Preeti said, we're speaking of ideas around independence, freedom of speech, of identity. Let's also remember that Tagore very firmly believed in this concept of samadarshan, which is equity of love. Equity not as the share market, but impartiality above every creed, religion, etc. A vast and spreading love for all of nature, all of life, indeed. And there I think we need to, that is one other aspect which we must hold very close to ourselves when we're reading Tagore these days, is Samadarshan and his openness to reason. Both these.
Right. So that sort of brings me, we naturally segue into what I was going to ask you next, is that, you've written in the introduction that you were reading this in Beer, and there were the mountains, staggering mountains where you were. And these words flew like swans towards you, right? So that deep sense of nature, which is what, so sort of, the philosophy of Tagore, which emanated in all across his works, right? That came through to you somehow in that, magical obsession, right? Later on, I mean, we found this word eco-poetics, and academics talk about it sometimes. How did you see it then? How deliberate was that on your part, that sort of angle?
As I said, I've translated Bhakti poetry earlier, and I think the Bhakti poets always viewed nature as animate. They were always there, speaking with the birds and the trees and the sky. Everything was animate, which I respond to. I do believe in hylozoism, this belief, this theory that all life is animate. Everything is alive, and therefore everything is also sacred, needs its place. And that was very much also part of what funneled in naturally. You have certain preoccupations or certain obsessions more, about really not just preoccupations. It's far deeper than that. It's a way almost of defining yourself, your attitude to the environment, the rest of life around you. And it just flowed in without effort when I was translating the Gitanjali. And I think it is important to know that, he just doesn't talk about beautiful things here. He also speaks about the darkness. And that is important. Let's also remember that trees are carnivorous. They're eating the dead plants, the dead animals that lie at their feet. So this mingling of light and dark, which is a journey through life, I found fascinating in Tagore. I found it true. I could respond to it. I could dissolve myself in it and work through, rework it as a way.
So Priya, the first draft of the manuscript was sort of, it came together in what, in a few weeks?
No, I mean, this book is phenomenally quick for me. I've done it in 2 years. So normally I take about, my last speculative fiction book, I think took 5 years. My books range from between 5 to a dozen years. So this is like, I think it was also because of the pandemic. And here I was focusing fully on the Gitanjali, on the beauty and the rapture that was there. It's there, and the wonder that I found there, which is like an invitation to other people to come in. it is also a protection. It is also a kavach, as it were. So both these things were happening simultaneously, which is why I think I work so fast on it.
Oh, wonderful. We'll come back to chatting more about classics and how one revisions them. Shall we, before that, bring Priya in to do some readings? Priya, are you in the mood to read?
Yeah, sure. So will you read?
Will I read? I can.
In the Bengali,
In the Bengali,
the poem you've all heard in school assemblies,
every
35, where the mind is without fear, which is again very important here in for this celebration which Majha House is doing. So,
indeed. So I'll read the Bengali. Forgive me any lapses. Chitto jethay bhoy shunno, uchcho jetha shir, জ্ঞান jetha mukto, jetha griher prachir, আপন প্রাঙ্গণ তলে দিবস সর্বরি, বসুধারে রাখে নায়ক ক্ষুদ্র করে। যেথা বাক্য হৃদয়ের উৎসমুখ হতে উচ্ছ্বসিয়া উঠে, যেথা নির্বারিত স্রোতে, দেশে দেশে দিশে দিশে কর্মধারা ধায়, অজস্র সহস্রবিধ চরিতার্থতায়। যেথা তুচ্ছ আচারের মরু বালু রাশি, বিচারের স্রোত পথ হেলে নাই গ্রাসী, পৌরুষের করণী শতধা নিত্য যেথা, তুমি সর্বকর্ম চিন্তা আনন্দের নেতা, নিজ হস্তে নির্দয় আঘাত করিপিত, ভারতের সেই স্বর্গে কর জাগরিত। Okay, so guys, Priya had given me some homework. Okay, she said that after you read the Bengali, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the Bengali original and Tagore's translation, which Priya is going to read for us a little bit. But for those in the audience who don't know Bengali, what I tried to do is I tried to do a closer translation, Priya, right? And with your permission, I'll read it. Where the heart is without fear. Yes, Priya? Okay. I've tried to keep the first and the last line similar because they're so very familiar. Where the heart is without fear, where the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where narrow walls do not deny, their households, unity upon this blessed earth, and nights and days bring renewal, rebirth. Where words gush out uncensored, where speech rushes undimmed seaward, and the striving soul finds perfection wherever it wants to, in whichever direction. Where the desert terrain of empty rights does not swallow the clear stream of reason that lights all false rituals. I knock loudly at your door, demanding that humanity move towards joyous play and more, towards work and action, all deriving from you, into that heaven of freedom, Father, that Bharat awakened to. I must apologize. I am not a poet. I have also tried to be very close to the original, so as just to sort of give a sense of the rhyme that Tagore had followed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So now shall I go ahead and read Tagore's version?
Yes, and I'll share
in
my
the English.
Yes, and I'll share my
Let me read the English, and then I will read my version. So then we can see the whole thing. I'll read Tagore's version now of 35, which is, well, here it is. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depths of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sands of habit, where the mind is led forth by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let me awake. Right. And as you can see on the other part of the screen, you have my version, which is very brief. It's almost like stutters towards the sacred, as I put it, because for me, the thrust of the poem really was, into freedom, let my country awake. That was the prarthana. And then in the second part of the poem, this is it. May the mind be without fear, knowledge free, world not broken, words come from truth, reason not lose its way, mind be led into ever widening thought and action. And this opening out, this constant opening out is what I wanted. And I had the words kind of scattered over the page so that you have this sense of reader engagement coming in and making much more, more sentences, more, filling up the gaps, as it were, with their thoughts. This is important for me, that it's a very participatory reading, a participatory listening. So that was 35. And now I would like to read one poem which is very important to me. This is the 101 from Tagore, in which he speaks about, what should I say? He speaks about creativity. He speaks about the ideas of, Tagore always thought that art showed you the path to the real, the kind of transcendence that was possible through art, the kind of dissolving into the work of creation rather than, forefronting yourself. And this in 101, he has many poems on writing and creativity, but this 101 is what I'm going to read. I have sought you with my songs. With them I have searched and touched my world. They showed me secret paths, stars on the horizon of my heart. To what gate have they brought me at the end? The first poem. And the second, far more scattered poem. With my songs, I feel about, searching, touching. Guide me to the mysteries.
Beautiful.
Yes, isn't it? I mean, the way he uses the senses to lead the intellect, as it were, and therefore the meshing of the two. And this whole tribute to creativity, which leads to what he terms the real, the parallel universe of grace that I think is always around us, which is there if we listen hard enough. So I think this poem was particularly important for me.
And I think, in the act of revisioning, when I went back to the original, there was greater electricity. And I think that is what also sort of makes artists and writers go back to classics in order to revision them. As you said, as tributes, right? But to also sort of make them new. I was very interested, Priya, because in the introduction, you've written how Tagore himself, writing to, I think, was it William Rothenstein? Where he said, and Macmillan had asked for a few of his short stories, and you've quoted Tagore writing in a letter that, that these don't need to be translated, they need to be written in English.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is, he wasn't interested in hewing to the word or the spirit and all these rather limiting paradigms, I think, of translation. He just did what he thought was right. And that is what I think one needs to do. And his openness to experimentation is also important, because I think when you are so involved in a work, whether you're writing it or translating it, which is really dissolving into the work and remaking yourself in the other person's voice, as it were, with the other person's voice, rather, much of it is intuited. And when it's intuited, there is not just an immediacy, there is, it is inherently volatile, because it has come to you at that moment. And therefore, every reader who takes it in or reads it that surge of life in the poem should sing in them, and their interpretation should also come through. So I think this volatility is what I am very interested in also conveying. As a matter of fact, he said that, he said, it was in The Gardener. He says, the translations are always not literal, the originals being sometimes abridged and sometimes paraphrased. That in itself is fascinating. Also, talking about what led me perhaps to apply this idea of experimenting, say, my linguistic experiments with Gitanjali, is also something which I just fell in love with from his letters to his niece, Indra Devi Chavdhirani. This one was written on the 19th of October, 1894. And I'm just reading 2 lines from here. He speaks about dotted outlines. Okay. He says, we know people only in dotted outlines with gaps in our knowledge, which we have to fill in ourselves as best as we can. I think that's a profound thought. We never know anyone or anything completely. And I applied this, I think, again, instinctively to my rewriting of the Gitanjali or revisioning of the Gitanjali, because, again, Tagore for me of the Gitanjali is definitely a 20th century Bhakti poet. He takes that place. And the Bhakti poets or people in the wisdom tradition in that way certainly knew much more than I can presume to know. And therefore, I thought, if I put in all these complete sentences, full structures, with my punctuations, I'm doing 2 things. One, I'm leading the reader on, not giving the reader enough space to reflect, because these are reflective poems. You want them to echo like Veena strings, as it were, in their mind. And 2, if I do full sentences, I thought that would be a little more than a little hubristic of me to presume that I have got it all and I'm somehow able to fit it all in and neatly present it. No, this is a place, this book is a book which invites reader participation, which is full of explorations. And an exploration can never be final. So,
oh, wonderful. And
thank you.
As Priya, as you said that your later research also, gave you these synchronicities, and obviously Tagore would have blessed this work, right?
Thank you.
And
thank you.
So if we, before you read the next one, Priya, I thought if we talk a little bit about your poetic process, okay, because you've written novels, you've written essays, you've written other sort of, you've done translations. How different is the process by which you sort of, I don't know the right word to use, not finish, not complete, maybe perhaps put down the words in some order and move on to the next one. How does that work? Is there a fixed time in the day when you sit down to wait for a poem, or?
One never waits for the poem. The poem comes to you. And because I think if you sit and wait for the poem, what happens is you procrastinate. And in that procrastination, I think the words just fly away. It's like speaking out the poem or the book, the novel's ideas too completely before you've explored them. Because the intensity is in the exploration, in the moment. That is the energy which gets transmitted to the reader. So I don't see too much of a divergence between my writing of speculative fiction or translation or poetry. I mean, because first of all, where are these categories coming from? they're not coming from the subcontinental tradition, right? Because
Indeed.
what did we have? We had the Mahakavya, whether in the written forms, in various languages. We didn't make a difference between the poetic and the prosy, as it were. This is clearly, it came in with the colonizers, right? This distinction. We had even philosophical texts, certain parts were written in a kind
verse.
of a prosy.
Yes, and
most of it was in, even the Dharma Shastras, you'll have the philosophical parts written down in, a compact verse, prose structure, and you'll have verse with it. So I've always found this a strange, fake division, and my mind doesn't think that way. So if my mind doesn't think that way, I cannot do it that way. I just go with what I feel comfortable with. Also, let's, when you're doing a translation, of course, I research the period backwards. And there is, even in my novels, I find that it might be a central idea that you're walking towards, and suddenly, the vortex of writing pulls you in. But these ideas which you're interested in, you've been doing a lot of reading around it all the time for a long period of time, as with my speculative fiction clone, where what do? You're presenting future idea, the future, you're projecting your ideas of the present into the future. With technological implant, shall we say, in a modified way. And there I was reading about climate change, I was reading about AI, all these things. Absolutely, what does it mean to be human? This has been a driving question. I'm reading about this, and then one day, yes, I see the figure of the clone. And unless I see the person I'm writing about, I can't write it down. So this is what happens. And in poetry, but there's one difference, I think. When I'm writing a longer piece of fiction, short story or novel, I think it's the visual clue I have of the setting. When it's with poetry, it's a turn of phrase.
I see.
It's a turn of phrase which wakes you up in the night and, you're buzzing, and then you get up in the morning. I do most of my writing in the morning, crack of dawn, and I start writing. So does that kind of answer your question? Yeah?
Yes, in a delightful way, in fact.
Thank you.
And Tagore himself, right, adding to what you were saying, Priya, he wrote everything across the genres, right?
Of course.
So while he was writing these poems, he was also sort of serializing Gora, right, which is a novel very much in the Tolstoy, George Eliot sort of tradition of the novel, right?
Right.
And then he wrote plays, which were so original because they were about these issues that he felt so strongly about, but they were written in music and there was dance. So I completely sort of,
Yes, I mean, I think this is marvelous hybridity in Tagore's own work. And we know that when he was writing and he'd be doodling, he'd make poems into figures, he'd make, he did all this. I mean, he was, what shall we say of Tagore?
Yeah.
Yes. Gurudev, sometimes. But may I read you one poem now?
Yes, please.
It's 69, which I think again comes into the idea of what Tagore, what is important for Tagore deeply, the immanence of grace in a way. 69. The same stream of life that runs through my veins runs through the world. The same life that shoots through dust in blades of grass and breaks into leaves and flowers. The same life is rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death. My limbs are made glorious by its touch. My pride is the life throb dancing. And the second poem here from his 69 is the same life, the same life, the same life in my blood. See? I just love that. I just love that. I think for him, the idea of, Ritu, Rita, the idea of cosmic harmony, alignment with cosmic harmonies, and the idea that it is the same, whether it's a galaxy or an atom, that there is a harmonious flow and creativity was very important. And this comes through. So it's there in almost every poem of his. Shall I read one more, or shall we?
Priya, we have a request as well. So perhaps it's from Gurutesh Singh. What he says that, many of Tagore's poems in Gitanjali are about divinity. And Priya, we also meant to talk about his inclusive and expansive spirituality, right?
Yes.
So, so Gurutesh Singh Ji's question is two parts. One is that how did you revise, when you were revising these revisioning these lines, how did you choose words, right? Because I remember reading in the introduction that you kept the original word order.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so the second thing is that he says that if you can read an example or two about divinity and spirituality.
Read. I think most of virtually all the poems in the Gitanjali are about divinity. I mean, what I did was, yes, I absolutely kept the word order. I didn't insert a single word of mine. That was, I think his words were not just sacrosanct. You have to, freedom and discipline go together. So on the one hand, you hold something, you hold it very tight. On the other, you let go. So this made me ensure that I didn't put in my words. I changed very few, and I kept the word pattern scattered over, sometimes repeated. So I've opened, let me see which one I opened to. Okay, it's 72 I've opened to. He, the innermost one, awakens my being with his touch. He puts enchantment on eyes, plays on my heart. He weaves the web of Maya in gold and silver, blue and green. His feet, at whose touch I forget myself. He moves in rapture. Deep hidden cadences of pleasure, pleasure and pain. So that, here you have, again, a direct address to the divine. He also doesn't believe in the religiosity, as it were, of, very much. And here is 88, I've just opened to the page. Deity of the ruined temple, the Veena sings no more. Spring breezes brings tidings of flowers that are offered no more. Your worshipper wanders with hunger in his heart. Festival day comes in silence, lamp unlit. New images are built and carried to the holy stream. The deity of the ruined temple remains unworshipped in deathless neglect. The second one, your worshippers of old, longing still refused. Fires, shadows, gloom, dust, oblivion. Beautiful. One of his darker poems, right? Very dark sometimes. And I think, may I end maybe this reading with his last poem, 103.
Yes.
Which is again one of my favorites. In one salutation, let my senses spread out and touch this world. Let my mind bend in one salutation. Let my songs gather and flow to a sea of silence in one salutation. In one salutation. Like a rain cloud, hung low, shed showers. Let my life take its voyage to you.
I
Tagore.
loved this. I love what you've done with this, and this is one of
Thank
my
you.
favorite poems too.
Lovely. Yes, yes. I mean, there's so much graciousness in it, isn't it?
Um, there's a question from Navpreet. Priya, I'll read that out to you. Has this revisioning process changed your views about Tagore and Tagore's Gitanjali?
What shall I say? Yes, of course. I mean, when I first read it, thank you for the question, though. I mean, because I was dying to talk about this. You know, when you, I think we all read a bit of the Gitanjali when we're in school. And it always seems a bit musty or fusty, and it, you know, kind of goes over the Daida and all this. Oh my, okay. Even 35, you think you understand the strength of the words, but you want a lot of it, the rest of it cut out. And there is a time in one's life for a book. There is a time when you're open, as they say in the Genesis, you know, a time to reap and a time to sow. There is a time for a book to implant in you and a time for you to bring out a book. And I think this is what happened. I was, in a sense, ready in the serene surroundings of Gitanjali, of being up in the Himalayas, and after doing these more than a decade with Bhakti poetry, ready in a way, I think, to receive some of it as I understood it. And therefore, here it is, this version. And of course it transforms. Every work of art transforms, and the Gitanjali is a very powerful work of art. And it transformed it. It made me reckless in my, you know, to undertake it. It was so wondrous that I didn't think what the consequences would be. I didn't think, oh my God, would there be gatekeeping?
Yes, would these angry Bengalis come charging at you?
Yes. Yes, I didn't want to, you know, but when you're rapturous about something, you just go ahead, you just carry through it, you know? So, yes, indeed.
Priya, while we wait for more questions to come in, what I want to ask you, and it's in keeping with the theme of this month at Majha House, that you said, and I completely agree, that Tagore was a modern bhakta, right? He was in the tradition of the Bhakti poets. And what he stood for, how do we engage with it today in India? What can we do to remind ourselves?
Is there any one way of engaging with a polymath like Tagore, or a hybrid, you know, an artist who practices such hybridity as Tagore? There are multiple ways, and as you know, he's a 200 crore industry, you know, with spin-offs for his Rabindra Sangeet. There have been films made on him from Satyajit Ray. A whole lot of people have taken the films, their plays, their dramas. There are people writing, there are people translating him, perhaps some revisioning him. So there's a whole plethora of activity around him. And this, I think, will continue. He is just too phenomenal a figure and too important in that he combines always. He's open to argument, he's open to reason. And yet he knows that there's an immanence of grace. There is no bifurcation, there is no either or. And it isn't, importantly, it's not about God men and God women at all that he's talking about, that one person or 5 people or 6 people have it. But it's there in everyone, in everything, and that makes it very, very important, very special to me.
So. We have a couple of questions. One is from Vandita, and Vandita asks, could you also talk about the way you have interpreted and rewritten the flower girl and the eternal yearning for whom you've never seen?
The flower girl. Oh, you mean the beggar girl poem? Is that what she's talking about?
Vandita, you want to
When I
can we unmute her so she can ask the question? Perhaps that might be better.
Okay, hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read Gitanjali for quite some time now. It's been, I mean, a couple of years. But what I wanted you to talk about was, there's this flower girl who's sitting, at the shore, and she's waiting with the flowers. The flowers are wilting, And later on,
yes.
this girl, she goes to the, the Panghat, and she's trying to get the water from there, and she lingers there. I would love to hear the way you've interpreted it. That's what I was looking at.
Right. Thank you. There is one, I'm trying to find those poems here because, there are quite a few where he has spoken about the woman. There is a woman who's going to take her lamp down to the river to send it off with the other lamps. There is that. He speaks about this beggar girl, who covers her head with her petticoats, which is a powerful and such a moving image. And that he is sometimes thinking of himself as this person, this flower girl, as you put it, or this beggar girl. Will you give me a moment to find these poems? Because I have not exactly placed this one yet. Okay. In the meantime, shall I read you another one?
Please.
81. I grieve over lost time, but it is never lost. Take every moment of my life, hidden in the heart of things. Seeds sprout, buds blossom, ripening flowers, fruit. I was sleeping and imagined work had ceased. In the morning, I found my garden full of wonders. I awoke. Right? There's that one about him. I'm still trying to find the flower girl, but is there anything else you would particularly like me to read or address?
There's another question, I think.
Yes.
No? Devapriya?
This is from Dr. Gurleen. Preeti, should we ask Dr. Gurleen to...
No, I think it's okay to just read it out.
Read it out? Okay.
Yeah.
Has the book, Priya, impacted your life before and after its creation? In a way that your poetry is an inspiration to yourself?
I think Tagore, the Gitanjali is an inspiration. And as I've said, I think it is transformative. But what this book has done, which I hadn't thought of when I was writing it, because it was released in the pandemic, when there's so much death and there's so much suffering, a lot of people, friends and strangers, have been writing back, commenting, posting about how this has helped them. This book has helped them get through their day or their life or handle grief. And this, I think, has been like a blessing to me. As Sant Tukaram said, words are the only jewels I possess. And if with this book, one can touch others at this time of deep suffering, deep betrayal, deep pain, I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Priya, you'd be amused by the next question from Navpreet. Navpreet asks,
yes.
As you have revisioned Tagore's work, would you be open to revisioning your works in the future?
I'd love it. I'd love it. Absolutely. Thank you. Because how does a work live? I mean, often it lives through translations, reworking. what I object to is not people taking my work and revisioning it or rewriting or quoting from it, and not, giving acknowledgement. That is what I do not like. Otherwise, yes, please go ahead. I'd love to read interpretation. And this is this has always been very important to me, to have people, the reader I don't see, the reader across. Tagore does say in, will you 100 years later, what can I give you from this garden of mine? But of course, I'm not thinking 100 years. I'm thinking, say, maybe 5 months. Someone reads a poem and wants to remake it. Fine, great, go right ahead. Right ahead, please. This is the way we also have to commune in these times.
And I think exactly as you said, that reworking it, revisioning it, all of it brings us back to the original as well. And so we see so many interesting revisionings in popular culture, right? Whether it's Sherlock, going back to Arthur Conan Doyle's work, or Jane Austen is so popular. And
yes.
Right, so I'm very glad that there's that element too, right, which brings it to the times, including how you've used language, right?
Thank you.
I think, Priya, with one final reading, perhaps we can hand things over to Preeti again. Your most favorite poem, is it possible to?
I think there's one question which just jumped in, or two
Right.
questions which just jumped in.
Oh, okay. Yes, this is a good one.
I see. Okay.
Yes, this is Gur Pratap's question is excellent. So I'm going to read that out first. Gulzar was not really happy with Tagore's translations of his own poems, calling them careless. He then paid his tribute by translating them himself. What is your take on this? How do you like or rate Tagore's translation?
How do you? What's the last line? How do you
like, or how would you rate Tagore's translation?
Well, let's remember that he was. Since I don't read the Bengali, as I said, I have only got the translation. And we also know he was doing it to take it across. He's 51 and he's taking it across. He's got all these poets eating out of his hand, the London Circle, etc., literary circle. And he wants to present it in a way that is fine with them. It's also, so I really, I do think some of them are perhaps a little embroidered, but I'm not the right one to speak about this since I have not read the Bengali. And
so
there are, the sound structures of each language are different. How does he play with the sound structures of each language? That is important.
So if I can just sort of jump in, Gurbata, the thing about the Bengali original is, how it lives in Bengal is that it's sung, right? It's sung. It's so, everybody knows it without even knowing the source sometimes, You could be standing at the traffic signal and the song that's playing in the background is actually from Gitanjali, right? So you're only half listening. The translations are a lot more sort of formalized, they're a lot more serious. In the original, he uses these little words and the words are repeated again and again. And, as Priya had asked me originally, that if you look at the original and the transcreation, sort of what he called the next to it, they seem a lot more compact and compressed, right? And he used prose. There is the poetry on the side flowed. But I think what is brilliant is that he was very open to translations, right? He, as Priya has written in the introduction and talked about a little while ago, that he knew that, they would need to be rebreathed, as it were, right? And he would have, when I was reading this book, I kept thinking that he would have really blessed this project of revisioning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's marvelous. Thank you.
And we have a wonderful sort of last question, which would bring this very nicely to an end. Gurleen asks that, what is one piece of advice that you would like to give young writers like me?
Oh, I think it's right. Like, I mean, right because you have to, right? Because that is your way of understanding the world. And write with your truest voice, because people know when you're faking it. The reader is not dumb. The reader makes out a fake. And of course, when you're writing, you're also reading. You're reading a fair amount of other people's work, because it's this rasa, it's this excitement, it's this elation. Oh, there's this. And experiment. You keep experimenting with styles, with forms, with themes, until you found which is strongest to you. But if you have to be true to yourself, and there find your way out, find your way through this underground river, as it were, the luminous underground river of writing. So.
Thank you, Priya.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this gift of a book, especially in these times.
Thank you.
Preeti,
Thank you. I'm going to ask Professor Gurupdesh Singh to now take over.
Thank you very much, Preeti, and thank you very much, both the speakers. It was the first time that I could see that a poem could also inspire another poem. I think this is a very, in a way, very creative way of reading poems. I think the last line that you said was very important. I think that you should have said in the beginning that reader is not a dumb person. He's not dumb. In fact, poems are made only by readers. Readers interpret them, reinterpret them, and in a way, remake them, reconstruct them. And that's how they have many lives. They become immortal in many ways. I think your revisioning of Tagore proves that even one poem could inspire a multiple number of poems. You are very lucky, Priya, to pick up on Tagore, because he's one of the best poets, and Gitanjali alone can honestly give you hundreds of new ideas. He sometimes speaks from the point of view of a child, sometimes a beggar, sometimes a woman. You did mention about the influence of Bhakti poetry. In fact, I also see in many of his poems the influence of Sufi poetry. If you remember, I think the poem 52, where the woman has spent a night with her lover, and in the morning she's looking for the vestiges of that love in the form of flower petals, or in the form of flowers, or some kind of a fragrance left behind. The lover vanishes, and what she discovers is the soul. You remember that deadly soul she discovers. And I think that's a very Sufi idea, because love is the divine love is a killer love. It's a kind of a very difficult love, and you have seen that. It was lovely. I think that your visit to Bede has been so fruitful and so productive that you were able to do this. I think you can go on talking about Tagore, because all of us have at some stage had encounters with his poetry, and his poetry in a way inspires, honestly. And I think I couldn't believe how W.B. Yeats, in his introduction, he speaks about one of the Bengali friends, and he says that I cannot see this, but my Bengali friend tells me that there are certain untranslatable delicacies of color. This is the expression he uses. Untranslatable delicacies of color in his poetry. And there is wonderful, delicious rhythm. And when Devapriya read out some of the passages, I could see, honestly, there was so much of rhythm in them. And when poetry kind of, becomes a part of the folklore, as she says, you can even hear Gitanjali on the crossroads. I think that's the mark of the popularity of a great poet. More than this, I think Tagore was, of course, very important for all of us. But it was important for Majha House to have Priya Chabria here also, because she is a poet in her own right, not because she has written this book. She has done a number of other books also. I think some other time we will have chance to read and probably discuss her poetry. She has done books like, Dal, that autobiography of the goddess, Calling Over Water, Clone, Bombay, Mumbai, Immersions, non-fiction that is. But then she has done a large number of other pieces of literature. I'm glad to have you in person here. It's a great pleasure. All our audience here probably has enjoyed your session, and maybe they'll be inspired to read more of you at some other stage. Special thanks to Preeti, I think, for arranging such wonderful sessions. I think this Majha House has been able to get some of the best minds, and I'm grateful that Priya and Devapriya have been able to combine a kind of double six. Thank you very much for being with us, and I think I enjoyed the session very much, and the kind of questions that you had also tell that our audience also enjoyed you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Professor Guruptesh, for that wonderful summing up and also telling us some more about Priya's wonderful work, apart from, of course, having done this revisioning that she's done. I just wanted to tell everybody about tomorrow as well. Please join us again at 6 o'clock. Another conversation. This time it is on Annie Zedi's Prelude to a Riot. And talking to her is Naveen Kishore, publisher Seagull, and fabulous photographer and various other things. This is also at 6 o'clock, and everybody who needs the link should please message Majha House, and we will be happy to provide that. The book is, I think, extremely important because it's a prelude. It's not the riot. It's building up. There's menace. And, you can sort of see the quietness, the way this whole situation develops and builds up between two communities in an unnamed little village or town in South India. It's very much worth looking at and worth listening to. So do please join. And once again, thank you very much, Priya, Devapriya, for being here and reading to us and showing us this completely delicious side of Gitanjali. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina, for hosting us so well, and everybody who's been here.